Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. One of the things I've often found really fascinating particularly when I was studying theater, was the fact that of all the fears that human beings have, including things like death, the number one fear that most human beings have is public speaking, actually. People would rather die than speak in front of people. So, a few years ago, I started taking some vocal coaching lessons for singing. And I found that as a person who speaks publicly, often several times a week, I've done lots of plays and things like that, singing connects with me emotionally in a way that opens up this vulnerability. And so I think that on those sort of questionnaires where they ask people what they're afraid of, I don't actually believe that singing in front of people is on there, because I think that, if speaking in front of people is feared, then singing in front of people, that's not even a question. I'm sorry, that's just not happening. Under no circumstances would I sing. And then this is why I think choirs are so popular, because I think that we innately kind of get the power of the singing voice, but to sing alone is a terrifying prospect. I wanted to talk a little bit about chanting today, because we've got a new Densu. And as our community develops and as Zen proliferates in the West, there can be a real tendency to forget what we're doing and to make it into something that is comfortable and convenient. And then when we do that, this practice really loses one of its fundamental strengths. So we have to be very careful. I spent a lot of time and energy on developing more effective, skillful means in teaching. Sometimes it requires some explanation. One of the terms that is used in Zen training, particularly in reference to awakening, and it's often used when we're talking about people who are becoming ordained, taking up a life of practice. The term is leaving home. It's been used since the time of the Buddha. This phrase that when we take up this practice of awakening, we engage in the practice of leaving home, or home leaving. And what's interesting is that this term wasn't always used just exclusively with the ordained. but that this was acknowledged as not being just an external practice of giving up your career prospects or your career, your position in family and society, and walking away from this. But it's also, and I think more importantly, it's really finding what it is where we hole ourselves up and make our home. So what I often just point to is, where are we comfortable? What is it that we sort of build walls around to provide ourselves with comfort? Sometimes that's the activities that we do and don't do. Sometimes it's the people that we associate with or don't associate with. It's the foods that we eat and the music that we listen to, and essentially it's all of those things that we put together, we box together, and we create into an I or a self. And as long as we sort of fixate that I or that self, practice can be problematic or difficult. Because the practice that we have is aimed at leaving home. The practice that we have is aimed at stepping outside of this thing that we've created, this space that we've created of comfort and familiarity and habitude, stepping outside of that into something which is on the skinny branches. It's uncomfortable, and it can be even unpleasant, difficult, vulnerable. Most of us, I think, and quite naturally so, don't like feeling vulnerable. We don't like feeling stretched. We don't like feeling tired. We don't like feeling hungry. We don't like feeling too warm or too cold. There's a whole bunch of things that we don't like, and we like to stay inside of this parameter of comfort and non-difficulty. And the whole practice of Zen is aimed at pulling us out of that, pulling us out of the sort of comfort zone and into a space where we really don't think that we can do it. Now, we have to provide, as a community and as a teacher and as a temple, we have to provide an environment in which it's relatively safe to do that. There's reasons that we don't like to do those kinds of things. And they go way back to this like lizard part of the brain where, generally if we're feeling hungry, we may starve to death. And if we're feeling threatened, we may be eaten by something. And there's like lots of good genetic reasons why we feel this way. But there's lots of places in our life where these kind of fears and anxieties are getting triggered, and it's not for any really good reason. We're not going to get eaten anymore. If we're hungry, it usually just means we need to go down the road to the store and pick something up, or go to our garden and pick it in this culture. And yet, those anxieties and fears and self-concerns, they have this tendency to make our lives progressively smaller and smaller and smaller. If we allow ourselves to be motivated by this comfort seeking, this way of homemaking in our lives, then our circle of people that we're going to associate with gets smaller, gets more choosy. The kind of foods that we're going to eat or explore, they get smaller. We just like what we like, and we want what we want, and can't that be enough? And the things that we're willing to go out and challenge ourselves with, they get smaller. The climates we're willing to tolerate get less diverse, and our whole world shrinks. And as we continue down this path, what we find more and more is that this place that we call home becomes more and more of a prison, more and more of a shell that we put between ourselves and the rest of the world, the rest of the universe outside of ourselves. these roles that we have in the Zendo, formal practice to begin with, is a way of really challenging ourselves. I think even on a day like this, coming and dressing in black and sitting all together in a room when it's hot outside and beautiful, there's a lot of really boundary pushing just to get yourself here in the morning, just to set yourself up and sweat through it and stay still and have sore knees and a sore back. It's a bit of boundary pushing. When we become more at ease with this, when we start to adopt this as our home, Zen practice offers us ways of sort of shaking that up. We have these training roles. We've got Jikijitsu, and we've got Shoji, and we've got Densu, and we've got Tenzos, and we've got all kinds of things. And each of us comes with our own sort of home comfort, our home furniture. And so sometimes when we're asked to do Jikijitsu, it's quite a natural position. For me, being put in this role of being sort of a barker and being the person who's establishing the boundaries and being the person who's making the corrections and making sure that the form in the Zendo is being followed is no big challenge. I mean, that's kind of what I did beforehand. I was a jerk. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say a jerk. I should say a enthusiastic boundary setter, an enforcer. Wonderful. Jikijitsu felt wonderful. In fact, it was quite a buzz to be the person walking around in a big Zendo with a stick and whacking people and yelling at people. Wonderful, wonderful. But the problem is that for me, Jikijitsu was too much of a home. This is why we shift positions. And for anyone watching me in Jikijitsu, it should have been very quick to say, okay, let's move you to something else. Maybe we'll move you to Shoji. Oh, Shoji. Barf! Who wants to do Shoji? Shoji, taking care of people. Shoji is empathic, being an empath, being able to look around the room at a group of people and see what's going on internally. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Do we need some lights on? Is that person doing okay? Do I need to pull them outside of the line and just give them a lifeline? I need to pay attention to where a person is emotionally and mentally during a retreat, and I need to connect with them and offer them some support. The way that I was brought up was very sort of like, as I was saying to Keegan, this pirate rules, you fall behind, you get left behind. So it's sort of like stand up or fall down, but you do that on your own. So the Shoji role of starting to invest or starting to make a connection with the people that I was practicing with and actually care for them required some challenging myself. I had to get outside of my comfort zone. I had to practice a lot too and really see that when one person who was suffering blew out of the retreat and left, it left a hole in the whole practice experience for everybody involved, including myself. When somebody passed out because of dehydration or heat in the Zendo, that had an energetic impact, a huge distraction on the whole retreat for everybody, including myself. And so I started to realize that in the Shoji role, if I'm doing the role, if I'm stepping outside of my own self-concerns and I stop looking at everything that I did as like a competition I needed to win, then it was better for everybody. But that was really uncomfortable. And when I was practicing Shoji, it was like dividing myself from sort of like the me that I know and I'm comfortable with, and this other sort of character, this new role, this new character that I had to literally sort of squeeze myself into in order for it to work, because the natural for me was to just be sitting in the shoji seat as a jikijitsu, see someone squirm and go like, oh, Jesus Christ, would they sit still, right? When instead of saying, why is that person struggling? Is there something that can be supported? Should I just let them struggle? So we have a new Densu. And Densu is a horrifying role. It's terrible. I think, I don't know, if you haven't done it, it's really hard, because particularly I think in our culture, we certainly don't chant much in sort of Western North American culture. And really over the past 100 years, like, singing has become virtually a non-thing. Certainly in certain circles, singing is very common. We have friends in the United States that their family sings like every meal. They have this whole like pre-meal like song thing. And for me, when you go down and share a meal with them, it's freaking weird, because, they all stand up and they're doing harmonies and stuff like this, and it's just like, what the... But we don't do it. And so when it comes to chanting, I think that for most of us, the tendency that some of us can have of wanting to sort of disappear into the crowd, just being a part of the group, which can be really wonderful when we first start practicing Zen, because that's so strongly emphasized. Just be harmonious, be harmonious. Jikijitsu, we start to take a leadership position in that role. And for many people, Jikijitsu is a really brutal, difficult role as well. Having to set the pace for other people, having to maintain the boundaries in a communal setting is uncomfortable. And certainly making a verbal correction for some people is a painful experience, in which you sit there and watch something and have this whole argument with yourself about, should I correct and how should I correct and blah, it's like, you can spend the whole period toiling after something where really all you need to say is no. But that boundary, setting that boundary, can be so far outside of our home that to leave that comfort zone is a real challenge, a real practice challenge. And that's what we're engaged in here, is this challenge of consistently leaving home. Consistently sort of exploring where it is that we're comfortable, and then kind of stepping outside of that in an environment in which it is safe and supported to do so. And that can be a very powerful experience, to start to step out of who it is that I think I am. This character I've developed in a particular line, in a comfort, in a way that's I've responded to circumstances in ways that have not killed me from the time that I was a child. And this is sort of like, of the vast world of experiences and possibilities from the time that we're children, just this simple activity of responding to circumstances in a way we think won't kill us sort of winnows our experience of life down to this very narrow path that we call me and I and my personality and all those kinds of things. From the perspective of Zen, it's all within the range of who we are. We are limitless and we are boundless. But in the creation of this I am self, we've made it very, very narrow. And so our practice in Zen is to challenge this. And in challenging this, we really start to taste, we really start to physically experience and embody the vastness of the capacity of what it is to be a human being. If I said, to a person on the street, hey, how's it going? Can you sing me a few lines of this Japanese chant, there's not a chance that that person would step outside of themselves, unless it was already in their house, right? Like if they were like a singer or something like this, and they were just like, oh, sure, give me that, you know. But for most of us, I think we just look at that person asking us like they were a little crazy. And so we bring a person here and we say, okay, so you're going to do the chant leading. And that's really hard, because at that point, all the sort of communal stuff, we're in this together, chanting together, sort of stops. And it's like, no, now we're going to be quiet and you're going to sing this. Ah! And as a teacher, one of my favorite, or I guess maybe a piece of advice for people is never let the Zen teacher hear that you don't really want to do something. Because for me, as a Zen teacher, if our practice is to step outside of home, when I hear, oh, I don't want to do that, for me it's like it's a flag that says, oh, you're putting your finger right where it belongs. That's exactly where we should go. So I try to more and more. When I was in training, there was no kindness. That's a hard thing to say. There's no gentleness about it, certainly. Make the mistake of saying, oh, don't want to do that, and be sure that that's what you're going to do until like you've got it in your comfort house. I try to explain a little bit more. One of my fellow monks once said, Rinzai Zen is more like hockey. It's kind of rough. We get bruised, certainly, in practice. The ego gets bruised, our comforts get bruised. Using our voice, for example, in chanting and leading the chants is a really challenging experience. As I said, during the orientation course, one of the things that I found is that our emotions and our voices are really strongly tied together. One of the exercises that we do is we do these things called pitch dives, where you start at the top and you descend with your voice. Ah! And in many cases, what will happen is that there'll be these sort of range gaps in a person's voice. Not just difficult transitions, but just whole skips. And it's like, so what's going on there? What I found is that oftentimes what will happen is if you slow a person down and you have them work through their vocal range, what happens is in that particular pitch that was missing, if they can just relax enough to sort of get through it, your eyes will well up with tears. And you'll get sort of like tingly in your torso. And what I found is that we often reserve whole ranges of our voice for particular emotional circumstances. If we're upset, if we're angry, if we're yelling out a warning, if we're scared, there's a particular range of our voice that we use. Each of us is different. And that's the only time we use that voice. And so when we're working through our vocal range, what happens is that we don't just work through this sound thing, we work through this whole emotional thing. And emotions come out. And this is why we feel vulnerable. When we're chanting, particularly when we're leading, what you'll notice, all of us will notice, is that, and it's great if you record chanting and you play the first 2 minutes of a chant and you play the last 2 minutes of a chant. What often happens is that they're like this, like tonally. The whole, the note and the tone of the whole chant sort of varies, and it's entirely based, in my experience, on the individual group of people that's participating in the chanting. And if you've done enough chanting, you see that there's all kinds of battles that go on in the course of a chanting. There's times where you're like, no, I want to try and move this chant to this range where I'm comfortable, or, oh, I can't even hear it here, so I'm going to jump up an octave or down an octave, and I'm going to try and fit in here, or it's too slow. And we all get involved in this sort of engagement with chanting. And then there can be moments where we stop trying to exert a voice, or we stop trying to exert an opinion or an eye into the chanting, and we can kind of fall in. And in some ways, that can be uncomfortable for us because we let go of control, we let go of motivation, we let go of our idea of what the chanting ought to be, and we become a part of something, and that's a wonderful thing. But the role of the Dentsu is a challenging one because it's a practice of using our voice alone to lead. And in Buddhism, we talk about sort of three spheres of activity: the sphere of the body, the sphere of the mind, heart-mind, and the sphere of the speech or the voice. And when we come into chanting, what we've got is a body practice where we're seated in an upright position, and our breathing is all aligned, and we're paying attention. The mind is unified by this text, by these the sutras that we're chanting. And the vehicle, our primary vehicle of action in chanting is through the voice. And so the activity of chanting is a very powerful one in that it unifies these three spheres of action. And when we're chanting, when we're the Dentsu, what we're doing is, it's like the role of the conductor in an orchestra. It's like the lightning rod, I guess you could say, of the chanting practice is the Dentsu. They're the person that everybody's got to pay attention to. They're the person that everybody's trying to harmonize with. They're the person that everyone has to follow. And if we're not comfortable with that position, and particularly if we're not comfortable with doing that with our voice, boy, that's a hot position. You're going to sweat a lot when you're doing Dentsu. But we also have to understand that we're in a place where, in the grand scheme of things, if you totally blow it and you sound like a 13-year-old boy doing the chant, like no one's going to, like, you're not going to get fired, and no one's going to die. No children are going to go hungry. Like, it's just singing, right? And what you find is that the big obstacle to really having strength in your voice, having and being able to actually lead that, it's not a mechanical function. That to some degree it can be. But this is why we do the warm-up. This is why we do the chanting, is to actually develop this tool. You've got the tools that are required. And the big hang-up is just around our own self-concept, our own idea of who it is that we are and what it is that we can do and that we can't do. And so much of the time it's just, there's so many people, I include myself, who think, I can't sing. I can't make a sound. If I open my mouth and say something, I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm going to say something stupid, or I'm going to say something laughable, and people are going to think less of me. And the job of the Dentsu is actually to cut past all of that and to make a sound from your very heart, from the depths of your guts, and to put this thing out there that everyone else can sort of grab onto and hang on to. And it's not something that can happen instantly overnight. When we first start, you've got to start where you start. And what you find is that nobody laughs at you. Nobody, and it's not terrible. And just like as we continue through all the rest of the roles and continue through practice, you find that the more you do it, the more you allow yourself to let go into that activity, the more you can allow the chance to sort of come of their own accord, just get out of the way. And then you sort of have this experience of sort of looking back or looking down or looking at yourself and saying, oh, this I that I thought I was, this home that I thought was my only home, I've gone, I've left it. I'm standing outside of that experience now. And I'm immersed in a much bigger experience. Once we start to experience that, once we start to embody this transformation, once we start to become more at ease, maybe once home starts to get a little bit bigger and include things like chanting and densu and all that kind of stuff, our habit energy can really kick in, and we say, oh, now I've really got it, and now I'm going to just work here. But as I've been saying, our practice in Zen is to leave home. And so this is why, again, we have this transition. We have this opportunity to change position, to become another role, to take on another dynamic, so that we are not allowing ourselves to sort of wall ourselves in or calcify this identity of self. I wanted to talk a little bit about the chants themselves today, but I think I've gone on long enough about the chanting. The main thing I really wanted to talk about, I guess, whether it's talking about it in the context of performing officer roles, or even if you don't have any officer role at all, if you're a practitioner, a Zen practitioner, a huge part of the practice is really just finding the door, the edge of what we think of as home or what we experience as home. One of the real challenges that I face in teaching Zen is that we're in a society, in a world, that's really obsessed with comfort. And so all of the marketing that we're exposed to and all of the wonderful distractions and toys and all that kind of stuff, it's pointed in one direction, which is, life's unpleasant and inconvenient, and if you just have this thing or do this thing, then you can be just a little bit more comfortable. And that's sort of what our whole society and culture is sort of bent at. And Zen is actually pointed in the opposite direction and saying, like, your world gets smaller when you have that direction. There's less and less that's comfortable. And so our practice is kind of aimed in the opposite direction, where we are consciously sort of sitting. I mean, even the act of sitting, once you go beyond 10 minutes or something like this, the act of continuing to sit is an intentional sort of push against what it is that we're comfortable with. And we feel it right away. As soon as we hit that boundary, you're probably all feeling it right now. I want to stand up. There is a value in pressing into that discomfort. And where that line is for each of us is different. And for each of us as individuals, where that line is shifts all the time, from day to day, in the period of an individual sit, from morning to afternoon, from from interaction to interaction, where the boundary of comfort is moves. And so we can't be complacent. We can't say, well, if I do this much Zazen every day, or if I eat or don't eat that every day, or if I do this much exercise every day, that's not good enough. In essence, that's making a practice which is aimed at finding that boundary into a comfort, right? Like we just lock it down and make it this object and try to say, okay, now I'm doing my practice. But our practice is actually to be alive and sensitive to where that line is. And as I said, it moves. And we want to really keep our practice in the zone where we're challenged, where we're pressing, where we're stepping outside of our comfort zone. We're pressing in to what it is that we think is beyond us or outside of us or other than us or not us. Questioning. As I say, each of us has to develop an awareness of that experience, of that boundary, of that line, because there's no external structure or practice guideline that's going to give us that. We have to know for ourselves. And the reason that it's important is, as I said, that boundary moves depending on our energy, our own sort of resources of energy, depending on our life circumstances, depending on our physical circumstances, depending on the time of year, it moves. Sometimes we can be really doing a great effort of sort of pressing outside of our comfort zone, and where that line is, just because of circumstances, can suddenly shift, and we find ourselves over the line and into panic or into emergency or into a dangerous space, emotionally, mentally, physically. And if we think it's about, I have to do this much sitting, or I have to engage with these kinds of people because that's what's challenging me, we've missed the sort of sensitivity to our lives. And the best thing that we can do in that circumstance is sort of back up so that we're challenging, that we're pressing, but we're not just going to crash and burn and really be in danger. Because what happens when we break, when we have a challenge like that that's over our capacity, is that our response is to immediately come way back inside the wall. Comfort, comfort, comfort. And it's natural. We want to heal. Likewise, we can be pressing, and circumstances change, resources change, our life becomes simpler. We see through something, we let go of something. And so the line of comfort actually extends outwards. And we can sit inside of it saying, I'm really, I set myself out to sit this much, and I do this much of that, and my diet is like this, and my relationships are like that. So I'm really a serious practitioner here. But the line of our comfort is now extended outward, and we've become comfortable and complacent and at ease, and are congratulating ourselves on our vibrant spiritual practice. And if we externalize and structurify what it is to be a Zen practitioner, this can be a real illness. We're checking all of our boxes and thinking, wow, we're really fantastic. But actually, the zone of our practice is out there. And so if we've got a good teacher or we've got fellow practitioners, they can kind of flag it for us. But ideally, we want to be able to say that for ourselves. We want to be able to say, I think I could do more. I think I could press into this. I think I'm a little bit too comfortable. And we can find ways to challenge, to step outside of our comfort and to step outside of this home that we've built for ourselves. There's ways that you can do that internally in the context of formal practice. And there's ways that you can do it in the context of everyday life. So, okay, I think that's just about enough. I just really wanted to talk and sort of throw Seizan a lifeline, because Dentsu, for most people, Dentsu is actually one of the more difficult roles because of this use of voice. The challenge in Dentsu is that you have to manifest your heart and lead through using your voice. And that's a very difficult thing to do for most of us. We're always told, be quiet, fit in. But in the job of the Dentsu, you've got to sing us forward. You've got to sing us into Zen practice. And that is a foreign and difficult, uncomfortable, non-habitual thing to do. It's a challenging practice. So I'm going to keep stopping you, and I'm going to keep asking you to do things over again. And it isn't because you're doing anything wrong. It's just more opportunity to step outside of home, to leave home. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.